Welcome to this edition of Peak Performers Podcast with your host, Thor Conklin. Thor will be sharing the necessary tools, strategies, and psychology you'll need to become a peak performer in any area of your life or business.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performers Podcast. I'm your host, Thor Conklin, and you are going to absolutely love today's guest. You know, I've got his bio here. I could actually probably do this from memory, but Jesse Itzler enjoys life living outside of the box. As a matter of fact, he does not have a box to even live in, and I can actually vouch for that. This is a man that lives life to its limits. In fact, he's a New York Times bestseller, Living with a Seal, just recently came out with a new book, Living with the Monks. He actually was a former rapper and MTV star, performed NBA's Emmy award-winning I Love This Game. We're going to get to your nickname or your stage name shortly here. And also wrote the anthem, Go New York, Go. He and his partner created Marquis Jets, and then sold it to Berkshire Hathaway. He partnered with Zico coconut water and then sold that with his partner to Coca-Cola. Man, what else? Ultra marathons, speaker, keynote speaker, kick-ass individual, ultra marathoner, and married to Sara Blakely, the founder of Spanx. Man, what did I leave out?
You did a pretty good job. I appreciate it. It.
Yeah, but the name, you'll have to Google it later. We were going to have, some dancers come in the background singing Shake It Like a White Girl.
I'm glad we didn't.
I noticed you never talk about that during the keynote talks that you do.
I know. That's, the music stuff was early on in my life, and I tend not to look through the back windshield. So I love that part of my life, but it's closed. It's a closed chapter.
All right. Well, I enjoyed watching the video just yesterday. So
thanks.
It's still up on YouTube. You haven't been able to block all the views yet.
That's okay.
Well, a couple of years ago, I had the pleasure to introduce Jesse at an event that we had here in Atlanta for a group of entrepreneurs. And after introducing him, we had a chance to talk backstage and just give you a little bit of insight of who this man really is at his core. We started talking, and Jesse kind of leaned over. He goes, "Man, you're a pretty cool guy." He goes, "What are you doing in a couple of weeks?" I said, "When?" He goes, 2 weeks exactly. I said, looked at my phone, didn't have any plans. He goes, "Hey, I'm having this group of people up to my house in Connecticut. Come on up and spend the weekend with us." So this is a pretty cool deal. Did that, amazing time. Matter of fact, it's amazing how many actually stay in touch with each other.
Yeah.
I mean, that's been a really, really strong group.
It was amazing. I've been to a lot of retreats, and I speak at them, I go to them, and I just felt like I wanted to do my own and shape it my own way. And I wanted to make it kind of 1/3 retreat, 1/3 camp, 1/3 business seminar. And I'm so glad you got a chance to come to it. It was super fun, super fun.
It was amazing. What's going to be your next book now? You've got Living with the Seals, you got Living with the Monks. I think they ought to do a TV reality show, Living with Jesse.
Jesse and Sara, believe it. That would be, well, it's interesting. I just turned 50, which has really been it's been an inflection point for me. I've done a lot of reflecting on it. It's made me think a lot differently on how I want to spend the next 30, hopefully more, but 20, 30 years of my life. And for a 50th birthday present for myself, I decided that I was going to give myself an amazing gift. And I thought about 50 things that I always wanted to learn how to do. So everything from DJing to ballroom dancing to free diving to etc. I made a list of 50 things, and I have a coach coming every week into my house to teach me how to learn these things that I always wanted to do. And it's completely reinvigorated my quest, my thirst for learning. Like as a kid, you want to learn, but as an adult, you don't really spend a lot of time learning. You spend a lot of time learning about how to sell whatever it is you're selling, or how to beat your competition, or how to advertise. But things that you really want, life skills and things that you've always wanted to do but never had a chance to do, you don't focus on it. So I'm 4 weeks in to this year-long pursuit of learning these things I always wanted to learn how to do.
So what are the first 4 weeks?
This is amazing, Thor. So you can come over. The first one was free diving, and I took my baseline of how long I could hold my breath. And this is why I'm so excited about this project. And in 2 days, I was able to 5X where I was.
Whoa.
Just through instruction, practice, and understanding the proper technique. And it made me realize that, like so many things in our life, we under-index in because we just don't know, and it made me think, like, in 2 days, if I could take my how long I could hold my breath and increase it 5 times, and that's a fact. Where else in my life am I under-indexing where I can get those kind of improvements quickly?
Yeah, amazing. I have a statue actually here back in the back. It's called The Self-Made Man. And it's about removing things that don't belong every day and figuring out how to become just a little bit better version of myself tomorrow than I am today. And, and what you've done there, first of all, you brought in the master and then you immersed yourself in it. So often, we just do something a little bit at a time. And it takes forever to learn something. I love the fact that you're just diving right into that.
Yeah. So it's been fun. I learned how to ride a motorcycle, which I didn't know how to do. And I have a ping pong coach coming, so I'm ready to whip your ass. And as my wife Sara always says, these are really important life skills at this point in my life. How to learn how to play ping pong. But for me, it's been a lot of fun. I got another 47 to learn.
Well, that's what I love about you, because you really figured out how to design your life, and you're living the life exactly the way you want to. You don't let things get in the way. You carve out every single day time for yourself. You do your running, you do your meditation. It's time for Jesse. You're a devoted husband and father, but you've carved out time for yourself, and you're not missing that opportunity.
Yeah, I worked hard to get to this place. I've had a lot of egg on my face. I've had a lot of success, but now I think I've really realized, and I'm not just saying this, and we've spoken about this, but my relationship with time is I think a lot of people, when we think about relationships, we think of relationships in terms of people. How's your relationship with your kids or your parents? Yeah. But your relationship with time is such an important one to have. And I'm super sensitive to the fact that the average American lives to be 78. And if I'm average and I only have 27 summers left, well, how do I want to design those summers? And clearly when I'm 70 and 80, there were no 70-year-olds doing the mountain run with us. Right? There were no 70-year-olds on that hill. The things that we love to do, you and I, Thor, as we get older, like, I don't know how much longer we'll be able to do it. I hope for a long time, but who knows? So that window shrinks. So it's created a tremendous amount of urgency in my life to want to do things that, get things done as quickly as I can. So I just going through my schedule for this year of the marathons I want to run, and my trainer, we were going through it. He's like, well, why don't you do those over a 2 or 3 year period? And I'm like, because I don't know if I can do them in a 3 year period. I know I can do them now. So that's sort of been my MO.
Are you going to run Leadville?
That one spooks me a little bit. I don't do great in altitude. I don't do great on trails. But I'm going to do a bunch of others that I want to do for sure.
Yeah, let's speak about altitude for a second. You and I just got done doing your 2929 event out in Utah, and that's one thing that I underestimated was the altitude. That was, base was what, 6,000, and the peak was almost 9,000?
Yeah. So that was an event, for those that don't know. We rent a mountain. We take out a whole mountain. We bring in tents to sleep in and food and some music and create our own little village. And the challenge is you hike up the mountain, and you take the gondola down, and you repeat until you climb the equivalent of Mount Everest or one of the other 7 summits. And you have a 30-hour, 36-hour time period to do it, but it is super challenging, as you witnessed. And I underestimated a lot of things in that event, and it was way harder than I thought.
But you got it done.
I did.
You got both of them done. You got Vermont done last year. You got Utah done this year. I still am 0 for 2. But it's interesting because each time I keep moving my strategy. So this year, as you know, I said, look, I'm not going to sleep. Last year I slept for 5 hours. I ran out of time. This time I'm not going to sleep. So I did it 31 hours straight. So Jesse's like, 31 hours? I was like, yeah, that was my strategy. That didn't turn out to be a great strategy.
Yeah, I think it's important to get a little bit of sleep. But you're not 0 for 2. There's 7 billion people in the world.
Wow, true.
A couple of hundred tried, and you were one of them. So
Yeah.
I think you're doing just fine.
Yeah, but as entrepreneurs, we're always hard on ourselves. But I remember Jesse was giving kind of a recap afterwards, and he said, "Do you realize? Just take your finger and just do that for like an hour. It's exhausting. To think of what we did for 31 hours, 36 hours. It's amazing what the human body will do when asked to perform."
Since then, Thor, all I've been doing is eating junk. I haven't done one run. I haven't done anything. So when we're done, I'm going to go for a run.
A mentor of mine once told me it's something that's going to stick to me and haunt me for the rest of my life. And that is, hell on earth would be to meet the man or woman you could have become. I mean, could you imagine being on your deathbed and you meet this person? It's like, all right, this is what you could have been had you exercised. Here's what you could have been if you ate properly. Here's what you could have done if you fed your mind properly. It's mind-boggling.
It's true. I don't want that.
Yeah, me either.
I want to become what I can become.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about hustle, because I run into entrepreneurs all the time, and they're like, "Hey, I want what Jesse has. I want what you had, Thor." I'm like, "Great." When I started out, I worked in the mailroom. I worked my way up, literally just walking around Manhattan delivering binders in the insurance business. And everybody wants to get to where we are, but no one wants to pay the dues. And one of the things that strikes me about you and Sara is how similar the stories are of how hustle played such an important role. Even when you were doing the rapping to your first company. I remember the story you said about Marquis. Tell the story about Marquis when you flew out, you jumped on the plane, the client's plane, and with the not the bagels but the muffins.
Yeah, well, first of all, you have to be resourceful and you have to rely on hustle when you get a 980 on your SAT. So you don't have a choice. You're not going to outsmart anybody, so you better out hustle them. No, I mean, I started a private jet company called Marquis Jet when I was 28, 29, something like that. And we started it with no aviation experience and not knowing many wealthy people and not having a lot of leads and having no airplanes. And we built that company to a company that did $5 billion in sales. We ultimately sold it to NetJets, Warren Buffett's NetJets. And when we started out, I had no sophisticated lead generation system. The only way that I could get leads, really, at that time, there was no internet, was to show up where wealthy people were and try to convince them. So I heard about a conference called TED in Monterey, California, which was just starting out. And I heard that there would be a lot of qualified buyers there. So I got a plane ticket from New York to Monterey, California, which, by the way, at that point, on a super tight budget, I think I connected 3 times, landed in LA, and then I had to drive 5 hours to Monterey. I remember it being like an 18-hour ordeal, door to door. And when I got there after 18 hours of travel, I realized that to get into the TED conference, you need a credential. And I didn't have a credential. I just showed up, and it was like Fort Knox there. So I was not going to get anywhere near anyone in the conference, so I just went to the local coffee shop. And I noticed that every hour people kept coming in with the credentials during their break from the conference, and they were ordering lattes and muffins. So the next morning, I went to the same coffee shop, first thing, 5 a.m., and I bought every single muffin that they had in stock. I bought every flavor, every muffin. They bagged them for me, told them I was bringing them to a party, needed the muffins, emergency situation, and then I took a back seat in the coffee shop. And at the first break, when everybody started coming in, they would ask for lattes and a muffin, and the guy would say, "We're out of muffins." And on the way out, I would say, "I'm sorry," if they had a credential. "I saw that you wanted a muffin. I happen to have an extra. Would you like one?" Which ultimately led to a conversation with someone that said, "Well, who are you? What are you doing here?" And I said, "I'm here for the conference. And I just started this jet company." And he said, "Oh, well, I'm actually in the market for a private jet." And he said, "Do you have a minute to talk about it?" And I was like, in my head, "Mr. Qualified, I absolutely have time for you." And he became my first sale. Guy who sold his company to eBay. I went back 18 hours later with a check in my hand to New York City. And, sometimes when you start out in a business, and your listeners all know this, they're entrepreneurs, you need the first win. And until then, I was deflated. I didn't know how I was going to get a sale. I was nervous if I'd even get on the board on the sales board. But once I got the first one and I serviced the hell out of him, he became a great resource for introductions and other potential clients. And that's how it works. You know, it's like the sale started. It didn't start when I got the check. It started when I had to earn his trust for him to open up his Rolodex.
Yeah, I see that so often, Jesse. You know, your clients, your raving fans, if that's your source of your income, they will tell multiple people. You know, I get phone calls all the time. It says, Thor, I don't know what you do. I don't know how much it costs.
Right.
All I know is that Bob's using you, and he said I have to call you. What do I do?
Exactly.
Just the way it works. And I love that story because originally they threw you out of the office. NetJets did. They're like, we don't want to do this. Who are you guys to even consider this? And then years later, you sell it back to them. You set up the whole concept and then sell the company back to them.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you that was never the plan. The plan was just for these two 20-something-year-old kids to get their foot in the door and figure it out as we go. And we were the business plan. We didn't even have a business plan because we had no idea how many of these cards we would sell. And what was interesting about it, when we had to raise money, if you would have told me, this is more for young entrepreneurs, but if you would have told me now at 50 years old, if two 27-year-old kids came into my office and said they want to start a private jet company, they have no airplanes, they have no money, they have no real connections, and they have no experience. They're going to charge way more than anyone else in the industry, and they're going to try to make this successful. By the way, would you like to invest in them? You'd be like, oh, and they got 980s on their SATs. No, you wouldn't. But the differentiator there is the untangible. If you would have saw the look in our eye when we came into the office, and you would have saw how passionate we were to make it work, and if you would have saw that, listen, you give me $1, I'm returning 4 to 10 back to you. And if you would have saw that, you probably would have invested, because that's all we had. We didn't have anything else. And don't ever underestimate that in anybody. And for those entrepreneurs out there that are starting, I know your watchers are more sophisticated and they've gone through the cycle. But even in low points, I always went back to that moment when we had to go in the door and get money from people. And what sold it was we were the business plan. And you're always the business plan. At any stage, Sara's still the business plan. At any stage of the journey. You know, I mean, you want to get to a point where the brand, you know, it stands on its own, it's institutionalized, you can walk away from it. But very often, you are still the business plan, you know? You're still putting out the fires. The customers still want to hear from you. And that never goes away. And that's a big responsibility. So you got to be prepared for the process.
And the money follows the people.
The money follows the people all the time.
No question. Hey, let's talk a little bit about niche. You know, niche rhymes with rich. There's a reason, because when you go too broad, it just doesn't gain traction. And something that you and Sara have been masters at is figuring out what that niche is. And I know you have a story about a college professor and your brownie. So tell the audience a little bit about niche and how important that is.
Well, I mean, I'm always asking myself as an entrepreneur, how am I different? How's my product different? How's my packaging different? That's one of the questions I'm constantly asking people that work with me. You know, how is our offering different? And that stems from a college lesson I got. It was probably the only thing I remember in 4 years of college. My parents paid, $40,000 a year. So $160,000 in today's, value of money to go to school to learn one thing. And that basically, I was taking an advertising class and I was pitching a product called Aunt Franny's Brownies, which was a company I was thinking about launching out of college when I graduated. It was a brownie company that my roommate's aunt, his Aunt Franny, would send us. And I thought I could sell her brownies. And when I was pitching this product, we had to create a whole slogan and full advertising campaign to present it to the class. The professor stopped me in the middle of my pitch and asked me what my point of differentiation was. And I really didn't have one. I just said, I'm delicious, I'm moist, I got cool packaging. And my professor said, basically, to my face, there's 1,000 brownies every day that come out, whether it's a real brownie company or whatever product or service you have, 10,000 of them every day. And if you want to make it, you better be a much different brownie than everybody else. You have to have a strong point of differentiation. You have to be able to articulate that in a short amount of time, and you have to be able to support that. And I was just a brownie. I didn't really, and he talked me out of the business, which actually probably was a good thing. But the lesson stayed with me forever. And that is, how do you differentiate in this crowded world? You know, how do you stand out and how do you leave a mark? And that's always been something I think about. It's always a question I ask myself. And even when I try to get someone on the phone or I write an email, how is my email going to stand out from the 10,000 in the inbox? Well, it starts with the subject line. It starts with the next is the length. Next is the way I articulate it in as few words as possible, and how I get to the ask, and how do I create a no-lose for the person I'm presenting to. And all these things go through my head just to be different than the other 10,000 emails that probably are too long, uninteresting, etc.
You know, ideas are great, but it always comes down to the execution. That's something that you've been able to pull off. What do you think the secret to the execution is?
Good hires for me. I mean, I'm a terrible operator, so I've been able to recognize my weakness. I'm not a great manager. I'm not a great operator. I have a hard time asking people to do things. And so I've been able to hire people that are good at that. So as soon as I was able to, you know, hire the right team to fill in my weaknesses, I did. And that was a big part of my success. It allowed me to focus on what I do best.
Yeah, and when you went to write the book, what was your? I know why Living with the Seal, but when you had to do that, so many people want to write a book. What advice do you have for someone out there that says, "Hey, you know, I really need to get that first book done"?
I think everybody has their own style of how they go about writing something. So it would be hard to just give blanket advice. Some people like to sit down in front of a computer and knock out, you know, I've heard 10 pages a day, and I'll be done in 30 days, 300 pages, you know, and some people take 6 months or a year. For me, the process was, well, when you're highly ADD like me, the process was, I had an outline. My first book, Living with the Seal, started as a blog. So I had an outline, a real-time outline. But I tried to find humor. I worked really hard to make sure that the humor came through in the book. I had an outline, and I made a bazillion revisions. You know, that was one of the few things in my life. This is going to sound a little bit weird because I've had companies that have worked. But that was one of the few things in my life where, Living with the Seal, where I didn't cut any corners. That was the best product that I could put out based on my capability. And I honestly believe that. I could have handed it in multiple times, and instead I said to myself, I'm going to reread it again through someone else's lens, and I'm going to edit it, and then I'm going to do it again and again. And I did. And I spent a lot of time on handing in a final manuscript that I felt the reader would resonate with the most readers. And I can't say in my life that I've done that many times. First of all, it takes a tremendous amount of energy. And businesses have worked, but that doesn't mean they've worked to their potential. That doesn't mean if you sold it for an 8X, you couldn't have got a 12X. It just means you sold it. How do you really know what your real limitations are, right? So you have to respect the process, because writing a book is long. It's long. And if you need to get an editor, and by the way, that's only the first inning of the process. Then you have to promote the book, market the book, make the book work for you. You have to have thick skin, because some people are going to say the book sucks. You know, there's a whole other side of it's not just the book. Now you have something that lives forever with reviews from forever on Amazon. Some asshole in Iowa says, you're a dickhead. That lives forever. And you like, wow, what'd I do? I just wrote a book. And, you know, so you have to there's a lot to it.
Did the second book, did it come easier?
I found that, no, it didn't. It was harder. It was harder. I didn't respect the process. Like, I forgot. I took for granted how much time and effort I put into the first book.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I find that with entrepreneurs too. You know, when you start your second or your third company, it gets a little bit easier in the beginning, but what'll be very interesting is that number 4 and number 5 can be harder to get off the ground. The ramp takes longer, the runway is longer, the traction takes longer. And you think it should just keep getting easier, and it doesn't, because each one is kind of its own entity, its own living organism.
The thing about a book is where it's very different. If you're in the manufacturing business and one of the pieces of equipment on your manufacturing line breaks, you can send someone to fix it. When you're writing a book and you have to put your third chapter together, and it's through your own experience, like I lived on a monastery or I lived with a seal, it's my story. I have to do it. I can't send anyone to do it. Even a ghostwriter, I can't. So it's a little bit different, and you know, you're out there, man. You're exposed. Your name's on it.
You know, what are I'm sure there's many lessons. I took away several lessons out of each of those books. What are your top 3 lessons out of those books? For you personally.
Well, they're very different. Living with the Seal is a book about limitations, pushing yourself physically and mentally. I think 3 takeaways for me is that I really thought I was operating at a high level in life. I'd sold some businesses and ran some marathons and ultra marathons, but I realized that I had so much more in my tank and I was capable of so much more. He had a rule called the 40% rule that he told me, that when your brain says you're done, you're only 40% done. And that's something that really resonated with me. Whereas in the Monk book, it was more of a spiritual approach. And I realized my relationship with time was out of whack. I realized I had to really reprioritize stuff. I realized I want to spend more time with the people I love, doing the things I love to do. I realized that there's a lot of things in my life when I was away from it I didn't miss. You know, I didn't miss watching TV. I didn't miss all my emails in my inbox. And so it made me appreciate things that I do miss, but also eliminate the things that I didn't miss. So I made a lot of big changes in my life when I came back. And so they're very different.
Mitch, remember tomorrow is something that you talk about all the time. Where did that come from? And explain to the audience what it means.
Well, whenever we have a big split-second decision that we have to make, one of the key things that I do to help me make that decision is think about, there are 2 words, remember tomorrow. How am I going to feel tomorrow based on my decision today? So if I want to drop out of the marathon at mile 22, okay, I'm in pain, I can do that. But tomorrow when people ask me, how am I going to feel about that? How am I going to feel about going 85% of the way? And if I have to make a decision about staying and returning emails, I had to make a decision on the hill. So I want to do one more on the mountain, 29 or 29, before I go to bed. And I literally said to myself, you will feel as much as you stink right now and you just want to be in bed and you're exhausted and wiped out, I'll be in much better position tomorrow if I do one more. So that kind of thought process has really helped me make key decisions. And so I always tell people, remember tomorrow. And we have mantras that we live by, but that's one that really, really impacts me.
Tell me what it feels like, you know, as a younger man. Here you are writing songs for the NBA, and today you're one of the owners of the Atlanta Hawks. How does it feel to go from writing a song for the NBA and then actually owning part of the team?
Insane. I mean, can't believe it. Kid in a candy store. Grateful. Every word you can imagine. I live in Atlanta. I love the team. I love the city. I love living here. My wife's been here for 20 years. And to be a part of it on any level, big or small, and as a basketball fan and a fan of the NBA, it's great. My favorite part about it is the people part. I love watching these young kids come into the league. Can you believe that? I'm saying young, like I'm stage. But I enjoy the people part of it. I remember after I wrote the theme song for the Knicks, I was 22 years old, and I started writing theme songs for professional NBA teams. I wrote pretty much all of them in my early 20s. And then I wrote the I Love This Game campaign for the NBA, which was a big advertising campaign that they had. And when I was done, I remember my friend who I went to high school with, who was a ski instructor, still is, in Steamboat. And he said to me, he's like, wouldn't it be really cool, man, if one day like you actually like owned one of these teams that you're doing all this work for? And in the back of my crazy cockamamie head, I remember the moment crystal clear. It stuck in my head, and it became a driver for me as we tried to, become part of this ownership team that we were putting in place.
Along the way, there was many decisions that you made. I remember you telling a story once about there was a situation where you wanted to promote and accelerate your singing career, and you had a producer or somebody, an agent, that was willing to put up some money, but in order to exchange that, you would have to sign away 10% of future earnings. And then you had a mentor that basically said, you got to be crazy. Who knows what 10% of your earnings are going to be down the road. But what are some of those crossroads or forks in the road where you came to, and you look back and you're like, you know what, I had the choice to go down two roads. I went down one versus the other that really impacted where I ended up. What are some of the lessons or some of the things that you learned? One, obviously, I think having mentors around you that can advise you would be one, or at least that's what stuck out to me in that story. What else did you learn?
Well, one thing I learned is I've had many partners along the way that haven't been able to keep up, and meaning that they went the same first 95 yards with me, but the extra 5 yards, they're like, it's not going to work, I'm done. And I was like, I'm staying in. So just the commitment to see things through to fruition has been a big part of my life, just kind of hanging in, staying in the game long enough for luck to find me. And a lot of people don't have the patience or the fortitude to do that. So I wouldn't say that there was more skill between my partners and I, but I was able to stay in it. I've had mentors, like you said. That was a pivotal point. I almost gave away 10 away of my future earnings when I was 21 years old for $10,000 because I needed it. I was broke. I was staying on couches. I lived on couches for 6 months with zero money, and I needed that 10 grand to build my business. I needed to get into the studio and write these theme songs because everything was on spec. It was an eat what you kill, and I had to create creatively. So I was at a critical junction. I was going to take the $10,000 because I thought that would be a really, 21 years old, man, 10 grand was like 10 million. And I got talked out of that very quickly. And that was a big moment in my life. I made a lot of mistakes that have been positive moments in my life. I think that have saved me.
It's interesting with that story that you were actually living on your girlfriend's couch. Was she your girlfriend at the time?
No.
You just met her at a bar?
I was staying at my friend's house. I was just moved back from LA to New York, and I was staying on my friend's couch. He had a roommate, and his roommate said, your friend Jesse's been here for 6 weeks. On Monday, my parents are coming. He's got to find a place to live. So rather than go and look for another apartment in New York on the weekend, I decided to go to New Jersey, to Atlantic City, to my friend's bachelor party. The apartment can wait. So at the bachelor party, I was at a bar and talking to a girl just randomly while I'm waiting for my vodka tonic. And she asked me where I live. And I said, that's funny. As of Monday, I have nowhere to live. And she wrote on a napkin her address. And she said, well, if you're really serious and you get stuck, if it's an emergency, you can come and stay at my apartment. I just met her. So I said, all right. I kept that address, and Monday came and I had to get out of the apartment. And I'm like, all packed up. I'm like, this is an emergency. So I showed up at her house and I lived on her couch for 6 months. Not a girlfriend.
Okay.
But as it turned out, her father was a wealthy entrepreneur, and he was the guy that talked me out of that $10,000.
Yeah.
You can come in, Lisa.
Yeah. All because you didn't have a place to stay.
All because I didn't. Yeah.
It's fun.
Thor, he told me this story that you talk about these moments and you never know where they're going to come up, and you have to kind of be aware or thinking about them or looking for them, whatever. But I went to this guy's house to get advice about whether or not to take the $10,000. Now, the first thing he said to me was, can you make this project, these theme songs I was writing, can you make it work? Like, if you bet everything and put all your chips in, can you make it work? Will you make it work? And I said, I believe I can make it work. And he said, that's not strong enough. I need to know, will you, no matter what, make this business work? And I'm like, yes. He was like, well, then screw the 10 grand. Go figure it out. But then the second thing he said to me was, what really, really impacted me and really still to this day gives me chills, is he said to me in this one meeting, he said, and this guy, I'm talking about a guy that has a penthouse with a pool in it, Picasso's and Monet. I mean, it should have had armed security around the whole place because it was loaded with like museum gems. I mean, I've never seen wealth like this. And he goes to me, I would trade every single thing I have for the one thing you have. And I'm like, really? I have $111. What's that? And he looked me dead in the youth. He almost started crying. And he was dead in the eye. And he goes, youth. He missed the process of the journey of becoming an entrepreneur. He had everything. He had it all. So he missed the ups, the downs, the challenges. He missed I'll give you 10 grand for 10%. He missed all that. And it made me really have a strong appreciation for the journey. When I had shitty days, I was like, this is just part of the process. When the manufacturer did call and say the line is broken, it was just part of the process. And I had an appreciation that that's what I signed up for. And it was a great lesson at 21. You talk about some of those moments you mentioned a minute ago that you had. That was, at that point I didn't understand it. I was like, yeah, right. But at 50 now, I understand what he means.
Yeah.
Because I would give it all back except for the wife and the kids to go back. You know what I mean? Go live in a log cabin in the middle of the woods. I'm good if I could go through the journey again.
Yeah. It's, it's amazing. And we get so caught up sometimes in comparing ourselves to others. And the only way we do that is, of course, with those that have more. And when we actually look at it, if you're listening to this, it's going out to 128 countries around the world. But if you're in the United States, I mean, think about it. You're making $50,000 a year. You've got a roof over your head. Do you know how much further along you are from the majority of the world? I mean, it's staggering. It's staggering what we have.
Forget that. You could go to the most impoverished places in this country. Okay? And I don't want to take this out of context or offend anyone or anything like that. So take it for what it is, what the point is. And people that are in the worst conditions can still have access to running water or a bathroom, even if they're homeless. In a sense, they can go to a park, there's shelters, there's whatever. I'm talking about parts of the country where there's no water, there's nothing. Like, to your point, $50,000? Are you kidding me? It's amazing. And, you go to some of these impoverished places that are war-torn, there's no homes, there's no access to water. You can't go to a park and turn the faucet on. You can't go into a place and get warm. There is no food anywhere. I mean, it's crazy. So to your point, and that's all I'm trying to say is, to your point, you're right. You're 100% right.
Yeah.
There's not a day that goes by where I don't say to Sara, not a day. I'm like, man, both of our parents are still alive, knock on wood. Our kids, knock on wood. I'm not saying, oh, you earn this or I earn this. Is think about what we are able to have. How does it even get better for most of us listening? But at the same time, it takes a death or a diagnosis or something from a friend or family member very often for us to appreciate that. Like, oh man, we need that reminder that, oh, did you hear so-and-so had a heart attack? And then you start to take inventory. We shouldn't have to take inventory. Every day we should wake up and be like, holy cow. And I don't feel like I need a reminder from a friend that got sick or a friend that died or a family member I don't need that to have an appreciation for where I'm at.
Well, I think I'm going to go out on a limb here from what I know about you, is you've got rituals around gratitude, around what's important. You're not distracted. You have a very clear view of where you're going, what you're doing, what you're creating, and why you're here. And so many don't. Is there anything in the morning that you do specifically that kind of grounds you?
Well, the one thing that I do that I think is really important as part of my routine, and I'm not like, I haven't read a lot of those Wayne Dyer books, or I don't know all these strategies, so I couldn't say that I have a specific strategy other than I have a deep appreciation, and I feel like that came from my parents. But Every day I take 3 hours for myself, and that's cumulative. And the reason why I think that's so important, and when I tell people like, that's impossible. You know, I have 4 kids. I'm like, so do I. I have a job. I own a business. So do I. I have a wife. So I have that too. And I have the same challenges. Kids have glitches. Parents are getting older. We have arguments in our house. Like, it's not like everything is paradise all the time. But what happens when you take time for yourself is, if someone took away, if Sara said to me, you can't run today because we have to go to this meeting and this guy and see this coach and da-da-da-da, and they took away the things that I love to do, I would resent my wife or my boss or whoever was taking it away from me. So when I run or I take an hour, and those 3 hours are cumulative. It could be 20 hours in the morning in a sauna. It could be 30 minutes on a walk. It could be sit on my couch and do nothing and read a book. But when I'm in my time, I'm not guilty or resenting or feeling any kind of anguish or guilt that I'm not with my kids or with my family. And when I'm at work, I don't feel any guilt that I'm not running. And so it's very, very, very important to, at least it's been for me. There's no blanket rule. Everybody has their own system. Yeah. You know, this might not work. Some people like to, but for me, I need that time. So, because I know once I get the things done, or I'm going to do the things that are important to me in a day, I'm happy to give my time to other things that my wife wants to do or my kids want to do or happens at work. But if that's stripped of me, what am I even doing it for?
Yeah. Yeah. And so many people, women are great at losing themselves in the process. You know, they give, and then all of a sudden they have nothing to give to themselves or their family at that point. You know, Jesse, when it comes down to it, I'm very good at looking at commonalities or things that run through successful people. And the one thing that you mentioned, I think that stands out most to me is you stay the course when many people drop out at the 95-yard line. What is it about your mindset that you've trained yourself or your belief system that allows you to continue to plow through that extra 5%?
I mean, first of all, it has to be for me. It can't be anyone else's dream or anyone else's goal. I have to want to finish it for me. So I think it all starts with inside of you. I was thinking about it today. I was literally thinking today, like, what gives someone that drive? Why does someone want it more than someone else? What are the common themes that make someone have a real fire lit in their belly? And by the way, when you see someone that has a fire in their belly, you see someone that's completed an Ironman or whatever, that's transferable. I think that fire lives in all the buckets.
Yeah.
It's not like all of a sudden you have this courage bucket and it doesn't translate to business.
Right.
You know? So I think it's universal. Once you have it, you keep pushing it, you keep pushing it. For me, it starts from me. It's something that I want to make myself proud. I don't want to let myself down. I'm not doing it for my wife, even for my kids. That's not a big enough reason. It has to be for you. And I'm a big believer in doing things that make you proud. You did it. You might not have gotten your goal, but you had to be proud of yourself for being out there for 30
years. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
You have to leave the mountain and be like, I'm an animal.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know I could do it for 31 hours.
Right.
I mean, I walked away with a muscle that is transferable to every area of my life. Period.
There's no way that didn't make you better. There is no way. Even in a 3-hour car ride in traffic, you're going to be like, I walked on a hill for 31 hours.
Yeah.
I'm fine listening to my radio in my air-conditioned car for 3 hours.
Yeah.
It just
go back.
So I think for me, it's a couple of things. I think for me, it's I don't live in the past. You brought up Marquis Jet. You brought up Zico. You're bringing up these things, but they're not on my hat. I don't even own a hat. I own one hat. It was 10 years of my life. It's done. Check the box and what's next? What's the next thing? That's how you build what I call your life resume. That's how you build a moat, separates you from everybody else. And that's been my driver. So part of that over years, and I wasn't always like that, has been created this, like, I got to see it to fruition, you know?
So what's next?
I have so much I want to do. I feel like my enemy's the clock. I have so many things that I want to do. I have a list. I keep a running list. Instead of a bucket list, I have an effort list, a bucket list of things that I want to do. I have these 50 things I'm learning now. I have a race schedule. The way that I like to do it, Thor, this has really helped me, and maybe this will help other people that are out there listening. But a lot of us live our life so forward, right? Like, what are we doing over the holidays? What are we doing New Year's? What are we doing next summer? Where's our kid going to go to school in 3 years? You know, like everything is forward. And when you live in the forward, like you project out there, and then time goes so fast, and I feel like you miss a lot of opportunities. I like to flip that model upside down. And what I like to do is say, to your question, what's next? I make a list of the things I want to do. And instead of saying like, well, what are we going to do July 4th? And I take those 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 things and I force them onto my calendar. I flip it upside down. Instead of saying these are the things I want to do, no, these are the things I want to do. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm doing them these days. And it's a completely different way of just keeping this pie in the sky, here's what I want to do thing, versus like reverse engineering it and being like, okay, I'm going to find the time. Instead of the time, here's the time, let's fill in what we could do on these couple of weekends. It's like, here's the 20 things, now let me go and just schedule them into the timeline. Yeah. It's a much different, I might not have articulated it, but it's a much way of doing it.
Yeah, no, I get it 100%. Every November I go away and I plan. I look back at the year in review. I see where I want to make some changes. And I plan out 2019. And my 2019 schedule is pretty much full by December 20th. I know what I'm doing, where I'm doing. Matter of fact, I just got an email from you guys, 29-29. I know where I'm going to be 2 weekends.
Me too.
Right? I mean, I got 2 things to finish.
I love it.
So,
yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate you're always fun. You know what I love about watching you on these things? You're social, but you're in your own world. You are locked in and committed. And like I said, it has nothing to do, and for anybody out there, it has nothing to do with how many you did, how many summits you did, or whatever.
Yeah.
It had to do with your effort and your commitment, how you dealt with adversity, and how you pushed yourself. And that's it. And I said to you after the thing, I'm like, man, I'm so proud of you. I cannot believe what you just did. What you did was harder than the guy that finished in 16 hours. Yeah. In my opinion.
Yeah, it's true. And I'm always looking for the lessons as well. And it's funny because I fell back into something that I tend to slip into. It's part of my personality. And that is, if it's to be, it's up to me. And I'm trying to flip, if it's to be, it's up to we. And I hiked a lot of that evening, a lot of the event by myself because I kind of wanted to do my own pace. And a lot of the people that finished said the same thing. You know, if it wasn't for Bob, it wasn't for Sally, it wasn't for my teammates that I hiked with over and over and over again, I would not have made it.
Absolutely.
So it's like, all right, so next year, and I'm making notes. Like right now, I've got notes for 29-29 next year. Lessons, because I don't want to learn the same lessons twice, right? I want to learn them once and address them. So I've already got notes in my calendar.
I love it.
This has been amazing, but we're running towards the end. I want you to share with the audience. You've got a new coaching program. Unbelievable that you put together this program. If you want to work with Jesse, he's got a program. He will coach you. Tell us a little bit about that program.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you. It's called Build Your Life Resume. It's an 8-week course. It's at my website, jesseitzler.com. And it's, it's for those people that we go into stuff like how do you get that fire in your belly? How do you get out of a rut? How do you build out your calendar to build your life resume? Most of us have a great business resume. We definitely go into business as well, but it's really it's a life coaching course, and it's been transformational for me. I'm getting so much out of it and learning so much as someone that's bringing people through the program. So I've loved it. But I appreciate you bringing it up.
No, I've several friends have been through it, and man, they just absolutely loved it. I got to get that on my calendar at some point. Jesse, man,
I come as my guest anytime. I'd love to have you.
Thank you very much. Well, have an amazing week. Thanks for joining us today. I know the audience is going to get so much out of today's episode. Thanks again.
I love spending time with you, man. You always make me feel good, and you're a great guy, so it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Man, I love you, brother. Thank you.
Thank you, man.